Hello and welcome to Into a Darker Wilderness, the podcast. This is Michael Kleber-Diggs.
And I'm Erin Sharkey.
Erin, we usually record the podcast at a super cool studio in Minneapolis, but we're not in Minneapolis right now. Where are we?
Yeah, we have a lakefront view. We're on the campus of Bemidji State University in northern Minnesota. We took a really cute little road trip up here, did all the road trip storytelling, and we saw a bunch of deer and wildlife along the way. And we stayed the last night in a cabin. It was like we had a whole nature adventure.
Yeah, we were at Itasca State Park, which is on Itasca Lake, which is the headwaters of the Mississippi River. And we came up here to talk to Shawn Hill.
Yeah, this place made famous by the Indigo Girls and their 5 steps down to the origins of the mighty Mississippi. And yeah, we spent the day with Shawn Hill. Shawn Hill, who's a contributor to A Darker Wilderness. And I'm going to read his bio. We're excited to be with him today. Shawn Hill, him, is the author of Dangerous Goods, winner of the Minnesota Book Award in Poetry, and Blood Ties and Brown Liquor, named one of the 10 best 10 books all Georgians should read by the Georgia Center for the Book. His numerous awards include fellowships from Cave Canem Foundation, Stanford University, and the National Endowment for the Arts. Hill's poems and essays have appeared in Callaloo, Harvard Review, New England Review, Orion, Oxford American, Poetry and Terrain.com, Tin House, and numerous other journals, and in almost 24 anthologies, including Black Nature, 4 Centuries of African American Nature Poetry, and Villanelles. He lives in Montana with his family and is an assistant professor of creative writing at the University of Montana.
Yeah, I'm so excited for our listeners to hear this conversation. Shawn Hill is a friend, a poet who means a lot to me. I was part of a mentorship program in 2016, and he was the mentor, and my time with him was so important. This conversation to me is such an insight into what makes Shawn so amazing. He speaks with thoughtfulness about the essay, about how it came into being. Shawn's practice includes a lot of thinking about archives and research and how they can inform creative practice. He brings that forward. He talks about his family's land, America's history, the things that come up in the essay, but also about his life as a birder, a little bit about him as a father. And he closes with like the most poetic and amazing writing prompt ever. So thanks for joining this episode of Into a Darker Wilderness. We're really looking forward to introducing you to Shawn if you don't know him and allowing more time with him if you already do.
Awesome. Enjoy. Well, I'm so glad that you're doing this with us. Thank you so much for making the time to chat with us and to talk about your essay in A Darker Wilderness. Do you want to tell listeners about how the connection started? How did we begin working together? Or I guess I could say it, but I wonder how you first heard about the collection. And
yeah, I just want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity. The initial opportunity to be a part of the anthology, and for talking to me today. It started with, I think, a blog post or the Milkweed newsletter or something. I was reading about the anthology, and I was like, oh, I want to be in this. Because I think the description was African Americans writing about nature and their connection with nature, and also using archival material. And I was like, I like archival material. I use archival material. I write about nature sometimes and stuff. And maybe if I reach out to Daniel, he can introduce me to this person who's editing this anthology. And maybe they might give this poet a chance to write an essay. And it happened. It worked out.
yeah, I'll let you in on a secret that your name was already on the list. But when I got the connection, I was like, great. Well, I don't have to cold email and ask. So I'm so glad that you said you would do it.
Oh my goodness. No, I was like, obviously I'm not on the list, but I need to get on this radar real quick. I need to get on
Silly.
this list. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So I sent all the folks ideas of what archival objects might look like, and I sent you a bunch of them based on like the things that I was learning about, what stuff you're into. Do you remember anything about those archival objects? Was it easy to pick one?
Yeah. I think you sent me 3. There might have been more, but I remember 3. And 2 of them had to do with my Alaska connection, my time spent in Alaska, in Fairbanks. One was, I think, a photograph of a jazz band, sort of a touring jazz band, like on an airstrip next to a plane or something. And the other was a picture of some guys working on a grader, from working on the Alcan. They were trying to fix this grader, building the Alaska-Canada Highway. And then the other piece was the land grant for Austin Dabney. And those 2 grabbed me, the land grant and the photograph of the soldiers. Was one because they kind of connected me to the 2 points in my life, geographic spaces, Alaska and Georgia, and then the military connection. I was like, okay, I can work with these two pieces and draw connections and tell a story, or do some exploration. I don't know that I actually tell a story, but ruminate on some things. Yeah. So I was like, oh, I hope it's okay if I use 2.
Yeah. I mean, I know that many of the writers wanted to use 5 and 6 and 7, so the fact that you could narrow to 2 was impressive.
Yeah. And there's a historical tie there, right? So there's service, military service.
Yeah.
In both instances, there's what I want to say, eternal hope that kind of service will allow things like full citizenship and access to all the blessings and rights available to citizens in the United States.
Yeah.
The disappointing outcomes following on that.
Mm-hmm.
I also think a lot about land.
Yeah.
And about nature and the tie in there. One of the things that I admire about the essay is your conversation on the difference between a coincidence and a connection.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about how that arises in the essay and how you kind of draw that distinction, and not to go too far into it, but how it's connected to like different professional approaches to information?
I was talking to my wife, she's a historian, about where people were from. There's one of the guys in the photograph from the Alcan construction was from West Virginia. And I was like, oh, I did some research, looked around to see where this place was. I was like, it's really near Harper's Ferry. And I was like, well, this is interesting to me. So the things that were happening in a place, the coincidences of things happening in a place, sort of pointed to some sort of artistic connections I could make by just sort of pointing those things out. And she, didn't really buy into that as a historian. I think she was like, let's talk about causal relationships. Let's talk about how events and decisions changed history, that kind of thing. I was like, I don't really need that. I'm an artist. I can just use juxtaposition, put these 2 things beside each other, and they see what happens. That's what I felt comfortable doing.
Yeah.
And I guess that's kind of how the essay is arranged in a way, too. Like, let's just put some things beside each other and see what energy occurs in proximity.
Thinking about the sections, there are quite a few sections in this essay.
Mm-hmm.
I admire that in some instances a section is a single paragraph. This is the specific thing that this section is designed to do. It has done that thing. And now I want to transition to a new section. For me, as a reader, as an art enjoyer, nothing lights my brain on fire more than unexplained transitions. I think in part because my mind doesn't always approach things in a linear, logical fashion. Sometimes I see the connection later, sometimes I don't. And I admire art that, but I want to be clear. The essay, there's always a reason why each section is in there, and it's clear, and it's adding to the conversation that you're having in the piece and the strategy and the thinking behind the sections, the varied length. Some can be a little historical, some can be more narrative, some are personal, some are about other things. And the way that all those combine together to me really adds a lot of energy to the essay. Is that an idea that you came to organically, or is that something that you started with pretty early?
This particular essay, it started that way pretty early. And that's one of the ways my brain works. I mean, it's kind of like I was kind of outlining in some ways. And writing sort of academic essays, papers, sometimes I would have readers who'd be like, this is interesting, but there's no transition here. And they were like, that can work in a poem, but like this is an academic essay. So I had to sort of work on that. Like, how do I get out of this one thing into the next thing? And here I was like, I don't think I need to do that. And the manuscript I'm working on now, there's a couple of essays that work that way, but then I also have some that are like, no, I need to make these transitions. So it's just, I think it depends on me, I think it depends on how I want to build out the piece and what the energy feels like as I'm moving into the piece. There's this one in the new manuscript that looks at the Berkeley Pit, but it starts in Georgia and it's about my son, and we sort of move into this meditation on danger, and then the Berkeley Pit shows up, in part because there's birds involved with the Berkeley Pit. There's these bird incidents that happen, and there's birds that are part of like being with my son. And so those connections, I don't think I have to make explicit. So I feel like that strategy could work in that kind of piece. And then other essays, I just need to like really like make the connections really clear, and make the transitions that is going to guide the reader through. Yeah.
I appreciated the moments too when it felt like you were doing some meta work to explain nature writing and to also talk about an essay in general. It was refreshing as a reader and I remember being excited reading early drafts that like it was also helping to help the whole collection shape its definition of Black nature writing, which was useful to me as an editor for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I feel like early on I was kind of overwriting that a little bit, and Joey McGarvey, the editor, helped me with some of that. I think you and Joey were in conversation with me about this, and I was like, well, Erin's going to cover that. So you don't have to write so much about that. You can sort of pare that back a little bit. So like I enjoy the sort of collaborative process here that took place to bring this essay into the world. And yeah, I'm glad that you let me say that a little bit, at least. I felt like it was important.
It was important to both this essay, but also to the larger collection. And also, I think it creates other connections between the essays in the book that were exciting to me. Once they were all in assembly, I was like, oh my gosh, they are saying this and this and this. Yeah, they are pushing the boundaries into the supernatural, into extranatural. Anyway.
I also really love direct address.
Yeah.
And that can be done with subtlety or like with direct and obvious intention. But I think your perspective as it arrives early in the essay and then also in other moments in the essay is vital. As we're having conversations about Austin Dabney, and we can offer a little bit of background on that, and land and citizenship and humanity and nature and all these other things, yourself as a black man from the South who has incidentally lived in multiple states, Georgia, Texas, Alaska, Minnesota, and Montana that I know of. We're going to gather your perspective based on what you're choosing to tell us.
Yeah.
And I love it when you just say, here's a bit of, this is what's driving me into this conversation. This is what I'm hoping to spend some time thinking about and writing about. It just feels conversational in a way that I always love, but I think works so well with a process that's rooted in research and archives and that kind of a information. For me, it felt like an intersection of a historical approach and a poetic, artistic, personal approach.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it was fun to write because I was like jazzed to find out more about Austin Dabney and sort of expand my sense of like the place I came from. And as you were talking earlier, it's like those 2 points like gave us such a span. Again, like I appreciate that you gifted me with these 2 objects from an archive. So it allowed me to think about archives and what gets kept. Then it allowed me to move from, 1776, the land grant happens a little bit after that, but like from the Revolution to World War II, that's a big span of time, relatively speaking, in this country. And just to sort of think about what happened across that time. And then it allowed me to sort of bring in Vietnam with my uncle. And just, I was like, oh, I'm getting excited, and I can't hold everything, but I think I'm holding a lot here. And there's some things that I feel like I didn't bring into this essay. Then I'm like, oh, that has to go in the next essay.
Some of the listeners aren't readers of the book, so I wonder if you could.
Not yet.
Not yet. They can. I hope they do. Could you tell us a bit more about the object in particular, the manumission document?
Yeah.
It struck me, this, thinking about it again today, that it is a document that is written over and corrected, and it seems like there's lots of scratching out and adding over, and I wonder about that as a metaphor for sort of the ways in which we're continuing to navigate what citizenship looks like in this country, what language we use around it, sort of thing.
Yeah. I think the actual document that drove me a little bit further into the archives was a land grant for Austin Dabney for his service in the Revolutionary War. And I got to look a little bit further into his life and find out that he'd been enslaved and was manumitted, and then reading that document gave me language to think about, like the ways in which his situation, being emancipated, reflected this country coming into its being, and the way in which African Americans were kept from that kind of freedom. so the language there was like, what I was like, oh my God, this has to be in the book. So just like looking at the, so many thoughts were happening. Looking at the cursive writing and trying to like parse some of the cursive, sort of flowing writing, was a fascinating, and engaging a period of time to sort of looking at it and writing and having like no idea what some of it was at one point. But then I kind of want to read this sentence.
I was gonna ask if you would read the section. There's this. You have almost an ekphrastic posture with respect to the document itself, where you are describing how you're it's on page 62.
Yeah.
And there's looks like 2 or 3 paragraphs where you're talking directly about the archival object, in a way. Well, I won't preface it. I don't know. Would you read that?
Yeah. No, because this was the document I found after the document you gave me. I was like, oh, I have to keep looking and digging. So the document, I'll just read it. The document, the language that granted Austin Dabney his freedom was penned in a flowing cursive script. This document fascinates me. It is full of definitions and self-definitions. It identifies itself as an act to emancipate and set free Austin, a mulatto. Before embarking on a 129-word sentence in the fashion of legal documents and 18th century explanations that begins with, whereas Austin, a mulatto man, at present the property of the estate of Richard Aycock, Esquire. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, mulatto comes from the Spanish and Portuguese word for young mule, the hybrid of a horse and a donkey. Mulattoes are folks of mixed black and white ancestry, especially those having one white parent and one black parent. Austin, who could have been the son of Aycock or some other white man, is thus defined twice, mulatto and property, in relation to the man who claimed to own him. The lengthy sentence goes on to describe Dabney's military conduct. During the late Revolution, instead of advantaging himself to the times to withdraw himself from the American lines and enter with the majority of his color and fellow slaves in the service of his Britannic Majesty and his officers and his vassals, did voluntarily enroll himself in some one of the corps under the command of Colonel Elijah Clark. Many black men served in the Continental Army and fought on the side of the Patriots, but with the British promising freedom, many more fought with them. It continues by attesting that Dabney in several actions and engagements behaved against the common enemy with a bravery and fortitude which would have honored a free man. And carries on by saying that the result of his valor was that in one of which engagements he was severely wounded and rendered incompatible with hard servitude, and rightly concludes that policy as well as gratitude demand a return for such services and behavior from the Commonwealth. This stitching together of clauses speaks to the fabric of ideas, if not ideals, of the nascent nation. Dabney's actions merited reward, but in the matrix of economics, chattel slavery, and imposed racial definitions in service of white supremacy, issuance of the reward wasn't exactly straightforward. Yeah, that was fun to write.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I have a lot to think about here, a lot to chew on. And that document, like, I feel like I writing for me is where I get to focus and slow down and try not to ramble, right? And so I was like, oh, I think I actually captured the things I want to consider right here. And I hope that, my chewing over these things, my working through it, is accessible to a reader, and that they want to follow along. Yeah.
I like how you slow it down.
Yeah.
This, it's in my view, and maybe this is cynical or otherwise, but what's attempted here is meant to be almost magnanimous and generous. But behind all that is like some real sadness and ugliness. There's that moment where they're like, also he can't really do slave work anymore. Like it,
right, exactly. He's not capable of hard slave labor. Like, really?
So we might as well.
Right. You might as well let him go. But we can't let him go, though, because that's not how the system's set up.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We can't just free property. Property has to be bought. So we got to work on some paperwork on that so we can get some money exchanged here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all that, like, I was like, and, it's not I think about, like, that in my work, I get to return to this because I have a poem in my first collection where this guy, Sam, he saves the Capitol building in my hometown, which was the capital of Georgia. Before the Civil War, it was on it. There was a fire there, and it's the same thing. It's like, oh, wait a minute, we can't just free this guy. Somebody's got to be paid, even though he acted on his free will, his own volition. He put out this fire. He climbed up on a roof and put out a fire and saved your government, basically. And we got to pay this other guy because economics, this thing. We can't just treat him like a good Samaritan because he's not a good Samaritan. He's not even a person. He's property.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it goes into this main question that you're asking around, and that generations after generations of Black Americans have asked, like, what does military service earn? Like, what does it get us? Aside from clarity about the stratification of American people, I think that's one of the most plaguing questions to me in reading the essays. Like, yeah, there's all these examples, one after another, about the ways at which people engaging in this volunteer effort to protect this place have shown us how fickle or how fragile or how fleeting or how, unavailable full freedom is to everybody here, Yeah, we see that with the passage around the folks building the highway in Alaska, too, that they had to do the hardest work with the worst tools in the furthest out location as in order to not disrupt white folks who lived in Alaska while doing this important labor for the protection of all of the U.S. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Traveling north to south
Yeah.
Yeah.
at a time when geographically, for Black people, that's not the direction you necessarily want to be
Right.
traveling.
Right. Yeah. No, it was, again, I appreciate having the opportunity to actually sort of work with this material and get these things out, and encounter the thoughts I needed to get on the paper.
Can you tell us about your family land? Can you talk about, the kinfolk's land,
Yeah.
your earliest memories?
Yeah. That property's still there, and it's just a small little 5-acre plot my dad bought at some point because he felt like that's what you do as an adult. And I will likely inherit it one of these days. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it. But it was this place where he was proud of that, and we would go. He'd drive out of town into the country, and we'd go visit it, and just walk it. And I remember these sort of handmade, like, live traps that we'd find that the neighbor guy put on it, and just kind of poking around. And it was just like, it was a space where I got to walk through the woods. And just, again, thinking about land ownership, like, there were Black folk who had a lot of land in the South after the Civil War. They after emancipation, some people kind of came into land, or worked to buy land and were allowed to buy land. So, like, land's important, and that's part of Austin Dabney's story. And so, like, my father's, like, part of that. And, my people, as many of us were farmers. My dad's not that generation. He likes to plant things to watch them grow, but he's not really a farmer. And so, yeah, that land was something that we got to have some sort of quiet bonding time on. There's this creek that sort of runs at the bottom of it. And I'm not sure what's going to ever happen with that piece of property. Yeah.
Well, you also invite us to think about land not as simply a commodity, not as simply something that can be sold for a value, but that there is a relational value to, that it is around the proximity to our kinfolk. It is about the relationship we have to its trees, its land, its creek, its,
Yeah. Yeah. I have these memories of family members having, like, plots they were growing different crops on for, like, family use, and that sort of being with people in those spaces. And then, like, the harvest, they're sort of sitting on the porch shelling peas and stuff, because I had kinfolk who had moved to, like, up north to Cleveland. They'd come back in the summer, and that was part of, like, part of the life, was sort of sitting on the porch and shelling things and canning things and all of that stuff. So it was a way in which you engage with family, but I feel like the land for me, it was about sort of this personal way of being with the non-human, right? I got to, like, go poke around and look at stuff and be in the trees, or by the creek poking at crayfish. And yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking about, this past spring, I took my son back to Georgia, and being in the yard I grew up in with him was very important to me. Like, squatting down and looking at the roly-polies, and looking up at the clouds and the buzzards, the turkey vultures flying overhead, and listening to the jays and stuff. And so, like, that sort of interaction with land is important to me, and was important for him to sort of see, like, this is where I came from. This is the ecosystem I grew up with, because he's growing up in Montana. It's just a little different, a lot different. And I feel like that's one way of trying to get him to think about my family, right? Because his ecosystem and the family, the chosen family we're around, as people say, it's different. Yeah.
And birding is a part of that process with him. Is it? I'm not a birder personally, but is it that? Are you curious around birds everywhere? Is it like you pick a bird that's your favorite bird, or is like how is his your relationship around birding evolving?
Yeah. So my relationship around birding is that my favorite bird is whichever bird I'm looking at, or listening to, and I am curious about them wherever I am, because they're often wherever I am in ways that, like, other creatures, other beings that I've, like the ones I grew up with, aren't. And so my relationship with my son is that, like, I'm engaging him with the birds. Like, look at this bird, let's listen to that. And he enjoys that engagement. And so now he's pointing out things to me. And so that's the way we can be together. And I'm trying to make him into a bird nerd dude. Like, we've got the Sibley bird trivia, reading the cards to each other, like trying to test each other and learn things along the way. Got the Merlin app, I can listen to the birds as you're walking, but also the Sibley app, so sometimes he'll just play bird songs to me to see if I know what it is. So I'm trying to learn them, and then I can do it back to him. So it's a way to, like, just kind of, pass the time where we're waiting and, for the doctor to come into the examination room or whatever, like these quiet spaces where it's like, it's just two of us in our lives and we need something to do. A way of engaging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sean, I'd recently finished working on a poem where, in a way, I'm making fun of myself for my inability to know what kind of tree I'm looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I can, if it's an obvious, like, I know what an oak tree looks like, for example.
Yeah.
A mature oak tree, especially. Paper birch.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at spotting those.
Yeah.
But I'm also just horribly content not to know what a tree is called, but think it's really awesome.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think about when I talk to friends who are birders, like yourself, like Drew Lanham.
Not like Drew Lanham.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you got some bird game. Like, listen, I
got a little bird game.
Yeah.
Drew's got all the bird. Drew's got all the bird game.
Like, he's, yeah.
Love Drew.
I get into the naming part of it. I think about my grandfather. We have, who has since passed on, and we have a small farm in Oklahoma that we as a family don't do anything with. Mm-hmm. From time to time, someone will visit and report back. There's an importance to our family of just having it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nobody is too far away from a recognition that there was a time when getting it was complicated, when keeping it was complicated and difficult. But when I would spend time with my grandfather, he knew the names of all the trees, what kind of birds were around. I don't believe he ever had a Sibley guide. I know he didn't have a Merlin app, like just using the calendar. I know that. But he had that kind of awareness. I was kind of chastising myself for not knowing what things are called. And then in the end, I kind of, hey, don't be so hard on yourself in a way. I say, but I love this tree. We have a pagoda dogwood in our backyard, and for years I've not been able to remember what kind of tree it is. I always have to ask my wife, who's a horticulturist. I've now written a poem called "It's a Pagoda Dogwood," and I can remember what it's called now. But I love that tree. I often am enchanted by it. I look at it all the time. I like it how it changes with the seasons, and but for years I couldn't remember what it was called. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about classification and naming and knowing on that level. And Sean, I feel like you're drawn to it because you are, as I know you, like you said earlier, I have to keep looking and digging. I feel like research and understanding, and you're guided into that by curiosity, but I wanted to also just ask about knowing and naming in nature and why that is important to you.
So part of that is like creating a shared lexicon, shared language. That's what naming does, right? You said so many things I want to talk about right now. There's an essay there. But like, because I was like, oh yeah, and I think because we're talking about land, and like, because earlier I was like, oh, what am I going to do with this land? And I don't really need to do anything with it necessarily, right? I'm somehow, it's doing what it needs to do, and the fact that I own it, right, means that others can't do anything with it, and I can let it do what it needs to do. But then also thinking about my cousins in the Low Country, South Carolina, who, where there are people who are just trying to maintain and keep the land because now some other people find it valuable. Like, oh, this is this Low Country land, near the water. And so there's these communities that are under threat of, development, people trying to buy them out. Black communities, right? And my cousins are kind of adjacent and attached to some of those communities. So thinking about that, but then you have this question about naming, right? And so I'm like, oh yeah, that. I got to stay on that. That's why I love talking with you, Michael. And so, yeah, the name is important if we have a shared way of talking about the thing we're looking at. But I think naming names of birds is, that's undergoing a shift now. People are pushing to rename birds, and I think rightly so. And I was talking to my wife once about what we're gonna, what calling the name of something does for me. Because I was like, I think it helps me see the thing better. I think I probably went over the line when I said something like, I think it helps me see it better than you. But it's like, if I can say, well, that bird's, a blue jay, the reason I'm saying that is because I'm looking at as much of it as I can to distinguish it from some other kind of bird that makes me understand it's a blue jay, right? And so that practice is what I go to birding for, right? And what I'm engaged with birding, how I'm engaged with birding. Like, I've always looked at birds, but now I'm like, oh, that's a thing that is this particular kind of warbler because it's got this particular kind of plumage. Or this is a house finch, in part because of the shape of its bill and its plumage, as opposed to a warbler that has a different bill, something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And that has to do with like their environment, what they eat, And I'm like, okay, so I'm understanding this in a deeper way than just like, oh, I'm drawn to this thing that's flying in the sky. Some of that stuff comes sort of, incidentally, like, at some point if you're in the South, you just learn what an oak tree is. You know what pine trees are. You can sort of see this thing that we have as a species of like categorizing things that needs to also be interrogated while you do it. So back to naming. The naming just helps me talk to people about, like, I saw this thing. And at some point, someone like, well, we don't call it a crested caracara anymore. We just call it a caracara. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think for me, it's also about the level of attention.
Right.
And that kind of noticing is deeply rooted in poetic practice to me.
Yeah.
Which might invite me to be more attentive.
Your economic way of saying what I just said is also rooted in poetic practice, because I was all over the place, and you were like, it's level of attention. Like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about when I'm like doing this thing that I do, looking at birds.
Yeah.
It takes all kinds. Yeah. All right. So can you tell us about why we're in Bemidji, Minnesota? What's your relationship to this place? And I'd love to hear more about the Northwoods Writers Conference.
We are in Bemidji because I direct, which is to say I'm chief collaborator on this writers conference that I've been directing since 2012 here at Bemidji State, the Minnesota Northwoods Writers Conference. I called Bemidji home for 10 years, which is, I guess, another reason we're in Bemidji. And then right as I was beginning to start directing this conference, I actually moved to Alaska. I had worked on the conference in the aughts with a professor who taught here at Bemidji State University, Susan Carroll Hauser, and I was her coordinator. And then she retired, and the conference went in hiatus. And then I was invited to bring it out of hiatus. And I wrote a grant to the State Arts Board and got some funding to bring this conference back. And it's been a really wonderful labor of love with some special people here in Bemidji. I have a great staff around me. And we run 5 workshops each year. It's week-long workshops. And it's a fascinating kind of puzzle every year to sort of pull off a conference here in Bemidji. And by the end of the week, I am tired, wrung out, and also revivified and enlivened.
It's such a beautiful location. Do you want to describe like what the
There's a bald
landscape.
eagle out the window right now.
Yeah.
It's there. It is. There it is. Yeah. See, yeah. That's where we are. I figured that was going to happen at some point in this interview. There's actually an active. So we're on Bemidji State Campus, which is on Lake Bemidji. It's kind of a blustery day, and there are white caps out there. And the campus is next to Diamond Point Park, and there's an active eagle nest in the park. Bemidji is on Highway 2. And here we are.
You just wrapped the conference. Like yesterday was the last day?
Yeah, yesterday was the last day. And I got everybody back on the planes except for some of my staff members that are still here. So people are home. and safe and sound and have had a good time, I hope.
Yeah, I love that. I have a number of friends who've attended, and I think they also come back revivified and invigorated in their mission as writers, and excited about what's next for them, and those kinds of learning opportunities, concentrated block of time with other writers, like you can't beat it. Yeah. Sean, earlier you mentioned that you're working on a manuscript. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that project.
I was gonna plug a couple of Milkweed books also, just because we have these Milkweed authors here.
One text that I've been fascinated with this year is Jerome Ellis's collection, Aster of Ceremonies, which is so gorgeous. The audiobook is so good. But just I'm not a person who is interested. I don't know. I like nature a lot. I love noticing gorgeous things, but I'm not a person that has an exhaustive catalog, like memory of names of things. But just the meditation of it, the going through all the names, all of the common names and all the Latin names of plants is fascinating. Just what it achieves. It's meditative for sure.
Yeah, Aster of Ceremonies is amazing.
Yeah. Oof, so good.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had a fantastic faculty this year at the conference. I almost said Kingbird.
Saw another one.
Yeah, Kingbird just flew by. Sorry. Had a fantastic faculty this year at the conference. We had Sun Young Shin, who taught this really wonderful workshop that I was like, oh yeah. When she said what it was, I was like, yes, let's do that. It was multi-genre speculative nature writing. And I was like, I want to be in this class.
For sure.
And some of the writing that was read at the participant reading, we have participant readings, that came out of that work. I was like, oh my gosh, I really should have been in that class. But that's not what I do when I'm here. And Valerie Miner was here, and Leah Purpura was here, and they were fantastic. And we had a couple of people who have books with Milkweed here. Nikki Beer read from Real Phonies and Genuine Fakes, her book of poems, her third book of poems, the first one with Milkweed. And though he didn't read from it, Qasim Ali's Northern Light, Power, Land, and the Memory of Water was a fantastic book. And it was this moment because he writes about this place where he grew up, spent some time growing up. That's a little bit north of Winnipeg, where there's a power plant, hydroelectric, and there's a lake there. And he's in the book. He talks about the lake, and it's a place where the river flows through the lake. And Bemidji comes from Bemidji, which means where the river crosses the lake. And the word they use there sounds a lot like Bemidji. And so we were talking about that. That came up because I sort of say Bemidji in our land acknowledgments. And he was like, oh, this is, this connection with water and place and language and people was we made that little connection that was like, oh yeah, language. And I guess which kind of goes back to like what you call a place, what you call a thing, and how we have a common way of talking about a thing. So yeah. Anyway, Northern Light, that's that. It's a great book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back.
Well, so Sean, I mean, you mentioned earlier that you were working on a manuscript, and I think it's a Milkweed title also.
Yeah.
You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. It's coming together, I hope. It's titled The Negroes Send Their Love, and it does some of the work that the essay does. There's some archival dipping in. The title comes from a letter that the governor of Georgia from just before and during the Civil War, his wife wrote to their home plantation in 1858. She wrote this letter back, and toward the end of the letter, so much setup needs to happen. So, we were talking about property and people as property. Governors at the time being the sort of planter class men, they would bring enslaved people with them to the governor's mansion to work. There was no full-time staff at the mansion. You just brought your people in. And so I was curious about those people. And I was looking around, and I found this letter that his wife writes back to the home plantation. And toward the end of this letter, about all the happenings at the mansion and the people who came and blah, blah, and the different dinners and stuff, she says, the Negroes send their love to their friends. And I was like, that was a fascinating thing just to sort of put in the end of your letter. And I was like, because they can't write home, they can't say that, and they can't freely go see their friends because they can't do anything freely, really, right? So that as a phrase kind of stuck with me. So the title is The Negroes Send Their Love. I'm still working on it, but right now the book sort of travels geographically and temporally. And so it starts in that era before and during the Civil War, and it ends in part a few hundred years in the future in outer space with a community of people who identify as Negro and who, at this distances removed, sometimes send their love.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah,
It's super exciting.
Yeah.
In between all that, there's all kinds of things that happen. The speaker moves from northern Minnesota to Alaska, has a son, moves from there to Georgia, moves from Georgia to Montana. It tracks that travel and also engages with some of the things that happened in the last few years, while also looking at other beings, other species, and sort of what they're going through. There's a poem about the lake sturgeon. There's a poem about American pika. There's a poem about the white-headed woodpecker. Yeah. So it's different things are happening. I think I have maybe, hopefully not too much going on, but I have a lot going on in the book.
Nice.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Oh, no, I would love an advance copy, please. As soon as it's ready.
Yeah. Sean, thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah.
It's
Thank
always good to see you, and especially good to see you up here in this beautiful country and to have time to talk about your essay and some of the things you're thinking about and working on. And it's great to have you with us.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are so wonderful and generous. Thank you.
Here's to more talking. Let's get together again soon.
Yeah.
Next time in Montana.
I'm on my way to Montana. Let's do it.
Yeah. Go on.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
All right.
All right. Can you read us a little from your essay, please?
Yes. In the early 1970s, around 2 centuries after the fight for independence, I was born in Milledgeville, Georgia, where I was also raised. My parents and I first lived in a white clapboard house with blue trim that sat on a raised brick and cinder block foundation, next to my maternal grandmother's home on the south side of town. Kinfolk lived all around. That house had been in our family for a long time and would later be passed on to other families just starting out. Before I can remember and after I learned to walk, my parents bought a trailer and placed it next to my paternal grandmother's house on the north side of town, in a community her generation called Newtown. My father was delivered into this world by a midwife on that property, and save for 4 years in college and the years spent beside my mother's mother, it's where he's lived for nearly 3/4 of a century. A big mulberry tree stood next to our trailer, and a fine fig bush and pitifully puny peach tree nestled next to my grandmother's house. I remember playing in the front yard under the shady pecan tree and in the backyard under the apple tree and scuppernong arbor. When we'd go visit my mom's mom out across the creek, as my dad would say, there was an apple tree behind her house too, and pecan trees and crepe myrtles and a pomegranate tree next to the house we lived in. This is some of the flora I have early memories of. For fauna, there were turtles and terrapins, frogs and toads, birds, so many birds, and squirrels and an occasional rabbit or opossum or raccoon. And with go outside and play of whichever adult was watching me at the time, I was free to explore.
Thank you. One thing we were asking all the guests on the show is if they could share a prompt for living or writing or thinking. Could you share one with our listeners?
Yeah. There's a prompt that I came up with for Poetry Daily. They invited me to write about one of my poems that was kind of an eco poem, a nature-y poem. So this is a prompt I wrote after talking about the lake sturgeon. I guess it's an invitation. I invite you to get to know a bit more about one of your non-human neighbors. Feathered, furred, scaled, exoskeleton held, grown from a seed, hatched from an egg, birthed from a wound, or others, or water in its various beds, the stones around our homes. Visit a non-human neighbor. Introduce yourself and pay attention to your neighbor's response. Use your body and your mind and be attentive to them with your several senses. Appreciate their story. Try to grasp how our lives align, what narratives you share. Find other resources to broaden your knowledge and appreciation of your neighbor's narrative. Write a story, a poem, an essay twining those narratives.
Awesome.
Thank you. Into a Darker Wilderness is a production of Dark Wilderness Productions, LLC. This show is based on the book A Darker Wilderness, Black Nature Writing from Soil to Stars, published by Milkweed Editions, who sponsors this podcast. Your hosts are Erin Sharkey and Michael Kleber-Diggs. Our superstar producer is Davi Gray. Theme music by Michael Fisher. This episode of Into a Darker Wilderness was recorded, mixed, and edited at Wild Sound Recording Studio in Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you like what you hear, smash that like button, subscribe. You better tell somebody.